Hello, everybody. My name's Tara Nash from the Conscious Grief series, and I am really delighted to be here today with Melinda Vail. Melinda is an intuitive therapist, a medium, an author, lecturer, and certified hypnotherapist. So, Melinda, welcome and thank you.
I'm so glad to be here, Tara. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, this is the first time we've met. I'm very grateful to Marianne for introducing us. And she introduced me to you because at Eric's house, her charity, which helps grievers, you do some work there with her groups.
Yes, I volunteer at Eric's house. I do life after life demonstrations there, which means that I stand in front of a group and allow people from the other side to give information to reassure those that are grieving that their loved ones are safe and sound. And I get very interesting information, not only names, Tara, but I get little quirky things that no one knows. And that way, the person that is listening can be well assured that there is life after life and their loved one is safe. So the last time I did Eric's house, I got this pink Cadillac is what I said. And someone told me that their spouse and they got married in Las Vegas and they had their picture taken in a pink Cadillac. So little quirky things like that, sometimes dogs' names. And, as long as the dog's name is a human name, getting Fido and that kind of stuff is different. But, if their name is Ralph or something, it's easy to get, And I love Eric's house because they do such a nice job there helping people with their grief companions. And it's just an amazing organization. So I'm real proud to be part of it.
And how did you begin your career as a medium, as an intuitive therapist, as all the things that you do?
Okay, so I was a very religious child and I was raised Catholic. And the Catholic Church was across from my grade school. And after school in the morning in second and third grade, I used to go across the street and sit in the church and pray by myself. I put a tissue on my head, Tara, because in those days you weren't allowed in a church as a woman without something on your head. And I used to pray for the statues of Jesus and Mary to speak with me. And one day I got very frustrated and said to God, if you're going to speak to me, you got to give me a sign, which, you're not supposed to bargain with God that way. But I did. I was like 9. And at that moment in time, a priest came out on the altar and pointed to me and asked me to come up on the altar. Again, in those days, girls were not allowed on the altar at all. And I was shocked and kind of looked behind me to see who he was talking to. And I was the only one in the church. So I went up to the altar and he handed me the chalice. And he cleaned, and then he told me I was a good girl and that I should run off home so that my mother wouldn't worry. And I took that as my sign that it was okay to talk to people that no one else can hear. And so from that point on, from the time I was a little girl, I guess you might say I had voices in my head. Mm-hmm. And then I joined a meditation group. And people were saying nice things to each other. They were holding an object. It's called psychometry. When you hold someone's object, it holds energy. And they had passed a basket around so that we could each hold an object. And I got Elvis Presley and 2 standard white poodles. And everyone was saying nice things to each other, like, I see you by a garden, or you're going to go to California, which I'm in Arizona. So everyone in Arizona and the US goes to California to get out of the heat. So, kind of generalized information. And I thought, holy moly, I'm going to say poodles and Elvis, but I did. And the woman began to cry and said that the object I was holding belonged to her husband, and that he had collected Elvis memorabilia and they had owned 2 large white standard poodles. And so from that moment on, it was like a light bulb that went on in my head. And from that moment on, I started talking to the other side.
Amazing, amazing. And I know that it's very interesting that you had this Catholic background because I was raised a Christian, and funnily enough, actually, before we started talking, my dad came through, and you had really great evidence. My father died when I was young, and then my godparents actually went to see a healer and connected with him. And I always remember they had this story for my mum. They said, we connected with Peter, and he was there with a white fluffy dog in the sky having a party. Mm-hmm. And I was like, wow. And my mum said, this is all rubbish. We mustn't believe in that because of the church that we went to. And I was like always seeking, trying to make sense of my life and my existence. And the church was the thing that I gravitated towards at that time. But yeah, so I had this fascination with this message, but I equally felt like, oh, I'm not allowed to go to this stuff, the occult, as it's known as.
Right.
So what would you say to people who are in that place of feeling a little afraid, or people who think that it's a load of rubbish?
Well, I would say that there's a lot of psychic mediums that are full of rubbish. I'll start there, because like any other profession, it attracts people who want control over others. Like there are great policemen, and there are policemen that want control over others. There are great doctors, and there are doctors that want control over others. And that you must get evidence from the medium that your loved one is talking. Now, I happen to work with names quite often. So you just gave me your father Peter's name, but I get the name Michael around you. Now there's a lot of Michaels in the world, so it's a very common name, but my guess is that Michael had something to do with your upbringing. And so I'll just leave it at that and say to you, so when I jump into someone's energy field and I get a verifiable name or a verifiable situation, then I'm something called an evidential medium. So you don't want to mess with mediums unless they give you evidence. Also, from the other side, let's just say a man cheated on his wife, okay? From the other side, he's not going to say, oh, I'm sorry I cheated on you, unless she already knew it. He's not going to be breaking the news from the dead that he was a cheater. That's just plain malarkey. No one would hurt somebody that way. And so you can't feel hurt by your appointment with your medium either. Now you can feel disappointed at times. You may sometimes, especially when there is a loss to suicide, or when we've lost a child, the information is never quite feels like it's enough, like you want to know more and more. And I caution people from medium shopping, because that's not healthy. It's not healthy to depend on a medium all the time either, because you have to be able to process your grief in a way in which you can live with it. People don't understand that grief doesn't go away. It just moves, but it doesn't go away. Okay. So, a medium can help make a connection so that that there's life after life, but you can't keep shopping for medium and continue, because it becomes like an addiction. So, mediumship should be a tool that you use to help you heal in some form or fashion, and it should be evidential. The reason that people have difficulty with it in religious circles is because of the con artists that are out there, and that people who are in grief are in such desperation to get reassurance that a lot of people will believe anything. And so I think there's that. I also think that religions have taught us that we kind of lay in wait for the second coming, or we're just in the ground or asleep in some form or fashion, and that Jesus is the only one that is ascended and is alive, and so there's some kind of mixed messages there. I actually still go to church. I still actually go to mass. I still embrace my original religion. I'm not saying it's the only true religion at all, which is another problem I have with religions. I think they all teach basic golden rule kinds of things, and then we get caught in all the little trappings of the other ego, human things that are created by our religions. But So I guess to put it in a nutshell, this is how I explain it, okay? Religion is like peanut butter, okay? It'll sustain you, okay? It gives you something that you can feed on, but a lot of times it gets stuck in your throat, okay? Spirituality can be like jelly. It can be so sweet that you pucker up, and it can be, too, out there in la la sweet land, But if you put them together, peanut butter and jelly, you have a heck of a sandwich. So you need to balance what your soul chose religiously with what you're learning spiritually, and find balance and decide what makes sense and what doesn't make sense. There should be common sense spirituality that doesn't seem to always be happening in today's world. Somehow in this world, we have lost our way on common sense,
And I love what you mentioned about the mediumship shopping, or becoming addicted to that medium shopping, because when we're really suffering in our grief, some people, they just want to connect with the other side. And like you say, we have to stay here. We have to be in this human form, as much as we may think, I want to give up, I want to be where they are, where my loved one is. Yes. What words of wisdom could you offer people who are in that place right now of just not wanting to be here and wanting to be on the other side?
Well, especially at Christmas time, right? Or holiday time, it really, makes it so hard. Suicide is a sticky wicket, So when you take your own life, there is karmic repercussions about it. You don't go to hell like some religions teach you, but there are certain karmic repercussions. If you feel like you don't want to be here, you want to be with your loved one, and you're not suicidal, but you just feel that way, okay, then of course counseling is in order. Time needs to pass so that you can start making movement. You have to honor and respect your loved one on the other side and what they would wish of you. Because nobody from the other side wants you to be miserable or feel guilty because you're laughing or feel like you can't move forward. So when you are putting that cloak of depression on, all it does is anchor not only you, but it anchors the person on the other side in such a manner that they feel like they can't find the joy and the bliss of being in heaven. Especially, let's say they suffered with cancer or drug addiction or depression themselves. When they get there and they feel such relief and such joy and such bliss, and they come to me always with humor. I mean, laughter is truly the best medicine between each side of the veil and between us as humans. But when we don't, kind of respect that or honor that, when we want to stay in the throes of our grief and kind of turn it into our persona, it really makes for difficulty for your loved one on the other side as well. That makes sense, yeah?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And often I wonder, what do they miss about the human form?
Just us. And they don't miss us as much as we miss them. And the reason for that is because they can spend time with us. So for example, I just gave a woman a reading a couple of days ago, and her husband passed from COVID, which I'm dealing a lot with now. And he kept saying to me, donkey, donkey, donkey. And she said, I have no idea. And he kept coming back around to it. And I said to her, well, he's driving me crazy with this donkey thing. So you're going to have to email me when you figure out what it means. So I got an email from her 3 days later, and she said, there's a picture of a donkey in my son's garage, and he was working on his car over the weekend. So see, her husband simply wanted his son to know that he was in the garage with him that weekend, right? Okay, so little quirky things that you get that, again, are verifiable, are very significant. So now that son, who's probably in his 30s or so, has the knowledge that his father's around because he told me what was in his garage, right? So,
And what about, do they respect our privacy?
Yes.
Yeah.
Most definitely they do. And, honestly, I don't believe in evil spirits, honey. I just believe in evil people. So I think a lot of the stuff that we see on TV and all that stuff is just made up to scare us. Because I've been in a situation before where I've had somebody hanging around my house or whatever that I just didn't want there. And so I just kind of sent them off and off they went. I mean, we don't really have this need to be afraid of the other side. It's just, there's no need to be afraid of it really at all. They do respect us and our privacy. They don't just, come crashing in when you're in the bedroom or something. I mean, they do realize that we want to not feel like, Aunt Josephine is watching us while we're, they have their own, just like we need to have here on the earth plane, respectful boundaries between each other. They too, have to have respectful boundaries. There's a television show here in the States where a medium goes around and talks to people randomly, like in a grocery store or, whatever. Well, it's been great because people then are more familiar with mediumship, but it's really been awful in certain ways because I wouldn't jump into somebody's energy field inappropriate. That's spiritual molestation. I mean, you don't come up to somebody and start kissing them. That's inappropriate. You wouldn't come up to somebody in a store and start giving a reading either. That's inappropriate. And what people don't realize when they see programs like that is everybody has a microphone, there's cameras everywhere, so they know they're getting read, right? So there's no surprise. And, again, we have to watch what we're doing with the way that we're perceiving all this and start using common sense with it. I have to tell you that I don't know if you ever work with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's material or not, or if you know who she is.
I do, yes.
Okay. And I was very privileged to give her a reading once. And she invited me to her home. And we spent an afternoon after the reading having tea and laughing our tushes off about the perception of death and dying. Okay, and she is the premier for people who don't know about her. She wrote about the stages of death and dying and grief, the stages of grief, and so on. Is very well known for writing several books on that, and was quite a character. And so she started people kind of taking death out of the closet. I think we should start taking death out of the closet. If we could, then grief would be different because we wouldn't be afraid to talk to each other about our grief. When I have a parent that's lost a child, one of their most difficult situations is that people stop talking to them about their child. They avoid the subject, okay? And that's just not fair because they still had that child. That child still lived. You can still say, how did that kid, do whatever, like ride a bike. I don't care what you say, but it gives them the opportunity to talk about their child, and it gives them great joy and satisfaction. So if we kind of took death out of the closet, then grief would come along with it.
Right, absolutely. I guess I kind of got into this because I thought, gosh, I always want to talk about death, but nobody else does. And it was for a project that I was doing. And then I thought, yeah, I'm going to base my project on death and grieving. And then from that, I was like, wow, this is really what I feel like I want to do in the world. And like you say, it was really powerful because I started just to reach out to friends and family and say, who would be willing to be interviewed? And when people came forward, they were just so grateful that somebody wanted to hear about these stories, because they said that, it's not like just normal conversation to start talking about these, because people don't know how to ask, or they don't feel that they can ask, and that it's going to be too upsetting. And I think your work as a medium to that you're encouraging people to continue that relationship, that we can still have that relationship.
100%.
And that's what's so powerful. And like you say, we can still talk about our loved ones. We can still talk to them.
Exactly. Yes. Yes. And, let's move it to term, because there's all kinds of grief, right? Like not just the grief of losing someone to death, but there's grief from, loss of job, divorce. But I talk to people often who have a terminal illness, and they will come to me and say, okay, tell me what it's going to be like to die.
Right.
And we end up really literally laughing in my office. Like there isn't a time, no matter what someone is going through, that there isn't laughter coming out of this office. I will joke with them and, talk with them about how to be unafraid. Some of their relatives will give me their names so they know who they're going to go see. And we will just really openly discuss it. And it feels so good to them to openly discuss the fact that they know they're leaving and they have somebody that they can share it with. And yes, we cry too. I'm not saying it's always a laugh fest. I mean, tears and laughter together. But there's that, as well as letting people, if we could take it all and lay it out in a different way, then even when we know we're going to leave because we have a terminal illness, we can feel differently about it as well. And the grief can be shared before we leave with others.
Right. And there's such a fine line, isn't there, when people have terminal illness, that there's the hope that they may get through it. So you feel like, oh, we shouldn't really have that conversation. It takes a specific kind of person or combination of people to go there with that. And I think that, again, like you're saying, taking death out of the closet, having these conversations now before you're terminally ill, like everybody's going to die. And how do we, it brings up the question of how do we want to live before we die as well.
That's exactly right. That's the question. And the way that I feel from doing 30 years of this is that God wants three things from us. I was going to say one thing, but I'm going to give three. One, he wants us to do the right thing, even when it's not the easy thing.
Right.
Two, he wants us to practice forgiveness. Three, he wants us to practice kindness. If we do those things, it doesn't matter whether we're on our knees praying all the time or in church or whatever. If we do those three things, then we've got it made here on the planet. This is Earth School. We're learning here. We're learning how to identify ourselves through our soul rather than through our ego. Those three things have left the ego behind when you're practicing those things.
Mm-hmm. And I'm very honored that you shared that story about Elizabeth Kubler-Ross as well, and that you had a great laugh with her, and that there can be a lot of humor in death too.
Yeah, I got to tell you the funniest part of it. Okay.
Yeah, I was going to say, I thought there was more. Yeah.
For just a minute, because it is a great little story, and I feel that she would enjoy me sharing it. So she lived far, and I had to meet someone in my car, and they drove me to her house. And they said to me, don't call her anything but Dr. Ross, and don't touch her. And they said, go through that door right there. So I was like, okay. So I went in, and that's just not my nature to put somebody above or below. And I went in, I stuck my head in, and I said, Elizabeth. And she said, in here. And at the time she was not able to walk, and she was on oxygen and still smoking. And, and I went into her room, and I said to her, to her living room, and I said, oh, I feel like the Pope just asked me to do mass. And she laughed and laughed. And so then we did the reading, we shared that time. Then she wrote to me a little bit after that. And then this is how synchronicity in the universe, or what people call coincidence, happens, or I call it serendipity, whatever you want to call it. So at the time, my daughter was in 20 years old, and she was dating her future husband. And he was doing mortuary support for work, which means that he picked up dead bodies and took them to the mortuary, right? So sometimes she would go on ride-alongs because they didn't have much time together. Now she's 40 years old now, so this was 20 years ago. And I got a phone call at 11 o'clock at night. And I'm an early to bed, early to rise person. And so when I saw it was her, I picked up the phone and said, "What's the matter?" And she said, "Mom, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross died." And I said, "How do you know?" She said, "We have her in the van."
Oh my God.
It made sure that I was one of the first people to know that she had passed over so that she could reach me. And so if she came to me after she passed, I would know. And so that was the connection between she and I, even though we weren't great friends or buddies or spent a lot of time together, just that one afternoon. And then she wrote me a couple letters. She still in her crossing made sure that I would know that. And that's a quirky little story of how the universe or God works in your life. I don't care if you call it God or the universe or Allah, or I don't care what you call it. It's all the same, right? And so that's just a little story of how, serendipity works, right?
Absolutely.
It's interesting, isn't it?
It's so interesting. Yeah.
Mhm.
I just keep coming back to that term, death coming out of the closet. I really love that. And how she was she was the pioneer of that.
She was the pioneer of that. I believe that our bodies are like a suitcase that houses our spirit. And we're supposed to get to heaven unpacking our suitcase throughout life. But all too often, people spend a whole lot of time packing it up. And then they get to heaven with a heavier load. Okay. And that's our goal, is to unpack our suitcase and to get to heaven lighter and feeling like we've managed to embrace ourselves in a place of self-empowerment and God connection.
Mm. And what sort of encouraged you to help more with grieving hearts, like people who are really experiencing grief? Because you could be a medium and not be so specific on grief.
Yeah. I have one of my children that suffers from clinical depression and has been hospitalized for it. So I'll start there. My father was a World War II veteran that served in the South Pacific. He suffered from PTSD. I have mental illness in my family. So, there's little snatches of this and that kind of create one's karmic pathway. I seem to attract people who have lost others to either drug addiction, suicide, or murder. I believe that's because I have compassion and humor, and those two ingredients help people heal. And so, and I'm not afraid to use my humor, even if it's a murder. And it just seems to help. So I think sort of maybe spirit picked me for that, with my family of origin and some of the things that I've dealt with in my personal life. And then I do feel like I have that compassionate piece that a lot of people don't utilize. I know everybody has some compassion, but many people don't utilize it.
Yeah, and I think talking about suicide and murder, those are two very specific things that require some skill, I should imagine. And I noticed that on your website, you do help the police in murder investigations, and you also do specific workshops with suicide deaths. Is that right?
Yeah. Yes, I do. Particularly again with Eric's house, but I have worked with police on a few cases, which is always interesting. I have several policemen that are clients of mine, which police are the most intuitive people on the planet. So that's always great. And we all have our own stuff, right? We all have something in our background that hurts us or whatever. And so as a hypnotherapist, my area of expertise is in healing the wounded child. So I work with people who have had tough childhoods as well. And so I'm not sure exactly why that all presented the way it did, but I do know that it feels purposeful to me,
And how many children do you have?
I have 3 children of my own, and then I have a bonus son. So my children, 2 out of the 3 of them are social workers. No surprise.
Compassionate parenting.
And then I have one biological grandson, who's really the light of my life. And I have 3 bonus grandchildren who have become the lights of my life. So,
yeah. And you reside in Arizona?
Yes, I live some place called Gilbert, Arizona, which is a suburb of Phoenix. And my office is in Tempe, Arizona, which is where the university is in Tempe. So I actually own a healing center. I have other people here that do other things. I have physical therapists and counselors and life coaches and massage therapists and a med spa here. And I have a little attachment like a gym, but I use it as a classroom.
Oh my goodness, that sounds absolutely wonderful. I'm such a advocate of people doing body work, and when they're grieving, because we hold so much in the body.
Yes. And if you don't do your body work and move that energy out of the cells of your body, it becomes dis-ease. That's unfortunately, people literally do die from broken hearts. They've got to, work through all of that body holding on to issues and energy of grief and other things, trauma.
Absolutely. I called this the Conscious Grief series, and I would love to hear, Melinda, like what you sort of see conscious grief as, just any interpretation from yourself.
So to me, conscious grief is about having an awareness, just simply an awareness of feelings and where you are at that moment in time, and allowing for that process to go through you without holding on to it agenda-wise, right? There are certain things that come from our subconscious, but when we are conscious of our subconscious, then we can look at the whole package. So it's a holistic grieving process, body, mind, and spirit, that would be conscious grieving.
I love that. Thank you. And anything else that you'd like to share as we're
You're just as cute as a button. I will tell you that. And that all of your viewers and people who you are helping are very honored and enlightened by your help. I think you have a true calling and are a true healer. So I will tell you that. I can see that in your energy for sure.
Well, I really appreciate that. And I really appreciate the things that you shared with me before this call. I can tell you Melinda is definitely an evidential medium, and she has very kindly put together, we're going to put a link at the end of this video, at the bottom of this video. If you join her Facebook group, then somebody will get picked to have a free 1-hour reading with Melinda, which is so generous. Yeah, thank you.
Instagram or Facebook. It's Melinda Vail Medium for Facebook. It's Melinda Vail Inc. for Instagram. And, my website is just melindavail.com. And, I've got some YouTube videos out there and some videos on my website. I think one of the videos on my website that is maybe a helpful video is that my son that does suffer from depression agreed for us to do an interview with each other talking about how depression affects a family. And that's on my website. He was very courageous to do that. I really appreciated him doing that. And so that's on the website. It's an awesome video.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. I will also take a look at that. So thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, Melinda, I'm so grateful to you, and it's just been a real pleasure to meet you. So thank you.
Pleasure to meet you too. Now you got to get yourself over here to the US, right?
No, I would love that.
From Eric's house and start expanding yourself all over the world. And
thank you.
okay.
Well, when I'm next in America, I will definitely try. I would love to come to Arizona. So yeah.
Don't come in the summer, honey. It's like hell here. Come in the winter.
Good thinking.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're so welcome. And to everybody who's watching, thank you so much. Bye-bye.